Hi everyone, my name is Amy Holden and I am the Student Ministries Director here, and today I have with me Ms. Genevieve Vargas here to tell us a little bit about herself and her story. First of all, your name isn't really Genevieve.
It is not, although some students do actually think my real name is Genevieve.
And I honestly thought it was Genevieve until I realized it was just Jennifer.
It's just Jennifer, Jenny, but Amy likes to call me Genevieve.
Yeah, so
and a few students have picked up on it as well. Riley Singleton.
I'm a trendsetter, what can I say? But, so Jenny, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're involved in student ministries.
You know, I'm Jenny, and I am a teacher here at Ventura Missionary School, teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. I do high school ministry, and I've been doing it now for seven years. Holy cow, 7 years.
So you started when you were 20.
I did. No. That would be 41.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, yeah, and I love it, and super glad to be a part of the team.
Yeah. So we're doing our series, as you know, on Seriously Jesus. And so today we're talking about anger. And so you've had some pretty crazy things happen in your life that you've had to respond to, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, I'm sure.
Yes.
Can you tell us about one of those situations and how you either started out in anger and moved away from it, or kind of how God worked in your life during that time?
So when you asked me these questions to think about, like, two specific ones came to my mind, both having to do with cancer. And so many people deal with cancer, and so I've dealt with it. My best friend Julie, when we were 34, was diagnosed with colon cancer, and then my mom about 2 years later was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And so many people have amazing stories of, like, yes, our loved ones beat cancer, but both of mine are nope, I lost both of them. So after Julie, I felt some anger, but not super strongly until after I lost my mom. And then I had these two no's, two big, like, hey, I've prayed, God. I've done all of the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And you said no. Like, I don't get it. And that's when I went into some depression and some anger, and I needed to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty angry for a while. I stopped going to church. I was really struggling with my husband and my son, like, coming home. I did everything I could to be at school and be like, hi, I got this happy face on. And and then I'd go home and I'd fall apart, and I couldn't handle life because I was so angry at getting the no.
Yeah. That is crazy. Yeah, I would not. That's so hard. And you mentioned that you kind of recognized there was the two sides. Like, at school you could have your face on and be the happy person, but at home you would fall apart. How did you get to the point where you could be okay at home? Like, what were some things that you did? How did you pray? Like, what did you do to get to the point where you could exist at home?
Yeah. So I hid for a little while, and then after, I want to say almost like 6 weeks of this, after my mom had passed away, my husband just looked at me and said, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Like, so I got called out. No one likes getting called out.
Yeah, but you had someone in your life that you trusted and was able to speak that truth into you because you had that relationship.
And then, like, I want to say, I don't remember exact timing, but like 2 to 3 days later, I had a friend call me and say, enough is enough. Like, she didn't know that my husband had said it. But this is, a godly Christian friend who was like, hey, you haven't been coming to church. Like, I know that life has been horrible and bad for you, but, like, you can't run.
Yeah.
And so the combination of those two really set me back on the path of, like, okay, like, I need to deal with this. Yeah. And so I have found that I needed to go to therapy. I had been in some therapy before my mom passed away, and so then I needed to go back. So talking to someone who wasn't connected to my mom and my friend Julie in the situation and all of that was super important. The two different therapists that I've gone to in the last couple of years have been able to like poke into me in a way that wasn't hurtful, because they weren't someone who, like, I had this, like,
You didn't have to protect your image.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't know the fun, happy, crazy Jenny.
Yes,
They're like,
and so
no,
they could see through things and ask questions that maybe would have been too uncomfortable for a loved one to share.
Yeah.
So therapy, and then really spending time with God and His Word. Like, I really had to get back to spending time looking at who God is and what He has for me, and that the no wasn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to see that, and if you want to know so much of my story, but I've gotten so many no's. Yeah. And I was actually talking with a friend about it. Like, I'm in a situation right now that I've had some anger currently. Yeah. And I'm like, I actually said to God the other day, like, okay, like, I've had so many no's. Like, I'm ready for a yes.
Yeah,
like,
come on, God.
Like,
come on.
like, bring me to win. And but even if this is a no, that I still trust Him and I still go to Him, and I've seen Him working in every situation, even when it was a no.
Yeah.
Both my mom and my best friend Julie accepted Jesus through their cancer, and they weren't believers. And so the no is that I don't have them now, but when I make it to heaven, they're going to be there. And so that yes for then is way more important than me having them now.
Yes, that's so good, Jenny.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. I
You're
know
welcome.
I know a lot of your story, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it. So I love it. I hope you guys got something out of that. Just Jenny's heart is so awesome for everyone. So if you don't know her, you should. And I'll see you guys in a second, and we'll dig into Matthew 5:21-22. So Jenny's going to read that for us right now.
You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell.
Thank you guys. See you guys in a minute. Bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy Holden, and I am one of the members of our wonderful student ministries team. I am so excited to be back with you guys, hanging out, talking about the Bible. So today we are going to continue our series called Seriously Jesus, and if you've watched our other videos, you know that we've been looking at a passage of scripture in Matthew called the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going through it just verse by verse and looking at what Jesus is saying and asking the question, seriously, Jesus, do you really mean what you're saying? And in our culture, in our context, is that really what you mean? And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek. The answer is yes, but we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper today. But before we jump into our passage, I have a confession to make for you guys today, right now. I am here to confess that I am a murderer. Now, before you go and change the station or whatever, and you completely write off the fact that I am here because of my past, I want to give you a little bit of context on this situation. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, or you follow my husband on Instagram, or you've seen us recently, you know that I have suddenly started living on a mini farm. So it started when COVID has started. We had some plants. We got like tomatoes and Brussels sprouts and a bunch of other stuff. Slowly that morphed into corn and pumpkins and just all sorts of things. And then eventually we went from gardening to chickens. So we ended up getting four full-grown chickens. Then we got 8 babies, and then we got 4 more babies, and then they grew, and it's been a whole thing. So essentially I live on a farm now in Santa Paula, which has been super fun for me and super fun for the kids. But I didn't become a murderer until our most recent adventure in farming. So we have some neighbors that live down the street, and they raise quail. So every time we go over to their house, our kids go and they play with the quail. The quail lay these super cute, teeny tiny little eggs that are super fun. And we play with their chickens and their quail and all that stuff. Kids love it. But one day I was at work, and my husband comes back from their house saying, we're going to hatch 120 quail eggs. And I said, we're going to what? And so he comes in with an incubator with 120 quail eggs in it and says, okay, in 17 days, we're going to have 120 quail. Me, like, okay, sweet, another farming adventure. So for 17 days, we watched these eggs. Every 2 seconds, my kids are being asked to be lifted up to look at the eggs. And I mean, eggs just sit there for 15 of those days. So it wasn't very exciting at first, but on the 17th day, those eggs started hatching. It was the coolest thing. It was so cool to watch them like peck a little hole and then they start coming out of it. And it was so cute because they actually would take naps. They would like open the egg a little bit and then fall asleep, and then open the egg a little bit and fall asleep. Like, it was super cute. They were like almost like these little newborn human babies that, I mean, I have 3 of them. So it was cool to see the similarities in that. But we had those and we watched them be born, and it was super, super cool. But then I made a poor decision. So quail are supposed to stay in the incubator for 3 days. And I'm a little bit of an impatient person. So by like day 2, I was like, come on, I just want to hold them. They're so cute. They're so cute. They're so cute. And so I took some of the quail out and I put them in a box with their finely ground food that they can eat as babies on the bottom. And we let the kids kind of touch them a little bit, not too much because we didn't want to kill them. And we watched them for a little bit. And so I left them out there with the heat lamp with everything they needed, and I went in and put the kids down for a nap. But then I came out, but before I tell you the rest, I want to let you know that quail are super fickle little creatures. If they get too hot, they die. If they get too cold, they die. If they eat too much, they die. If they don't eat enough, they die. If they drink too much water, they die. If they don't drink enough water, they die. If you put the water dish in there and it's not deep enough, or if it's too deep, they drown themselves. So they're not the most intelligent creature. So I want to kind of give you that background just so you know that I'm not as heartless as I seem. But anyway, I came back out to the backyard after putting the kids down for a nap, and they had decided they no longer wanted to live. So I had a bunch of dead quail, probably like 5 or 6 dead quail in my backyard, and had to figure out what to do with them and how to explain that to the kids, which was super sad. So anyway, I'm glad I got that off my chest for now. So now we're going to go to our passage. I promise it relates, guys. Don't worry. But we're going to get into our passage. So the couple of verses we're going to read from are from this big sermon that Jesus gives called the Sermon on the Mount. And in this section, he talks about murder, hell, and a super cool word in Aramaic that is rakah. So doesn't that sound super fun? So let's go ahead and read the passage. So we're going to be in Matthew 5:21 and 22. And it says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, 'Raca,' is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." So in this passage, Jesus talks about something that we all know is bad, murder, and ties it to something that we all experience, anger. So he says, I know you've been told not to murder people and that if you murder people, you'll be judged. But he says, if you are angry, you will still have that judgment. And when we look at that, we kind of think like, seriously, Jesus? Because we all know it's wrong to murder people, but I'm pretty sure it's worse to murder someone than it is to just be mad at them. But remember, Jesus is showing us how we tend to give different weight to different parts of Scripture. We tend to think of murder as like this heavy commandment that you just do not do. And we think of anger as more of a light commandment. Yeah, you probably shouldn't do it, but it's okay if you do. And Jesus wants us to see that murder starts out as anger, that they're related, that they have the same motivation. We can't say, ooh, murder, that's so bad, but then be okay with hating someone or different groups of people, because they start at the same place. Now, I'm not saying that if you're angry at someone, someday you're going to murder them. That's just absolutely ridiculous. That's not how life works. But I'm just pointing out that Jesus is linking the two. So there must be some correlation there. There must be something that connects the two. And I think it's because murder and anger both destroy our hearts. They allow us to not be in right relationship with God and with others, because both of those things can't exist in our heart when we're in right relationship with God. So a lot of times when we read this passage, that the couple verses that I read, we kind kind of stop there. We look at it and we say, okay, I'm not going to murder anyone. And okay, I'll try really hard not to be angry at people because God tells me not to. And then we kind of say like, okay, I'm done. Thanks God. Like, see you later. But I want to camp out there a little bit longer. I want to look at anger. Let's start there. What is anger? What do we know about it? Well, we know it's an emotion. And we know that it is usually seen as a negative emotion. Most of the time when we think of anger, we think of negativity, we think of like violence, we think of all sorts of things. But we do know that Jesus got angry. So as a challenge to that idea that anger is always negative, I want to look at a passage in scripture where Jesus actually experiences that emotion. So we're going to flip over, if you have your Bible, to John 2:12 through 17 and look at an example of when Jesus was angry. So go ahead, get your Bible, open it. I want to hear the little pages like making the noise. So go to John 2:12 through 17, and it says, "After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, 'Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?' His disciples remembered that it is written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" So that is a picture of Jesus being angry. That's a picture of him seeing something that was wrong and getting upset about it and then acting on that. So as disciples of Jesus, we can kind of conclude from that, like, Jesus got angry. We are disciples of Jesus, so we therefore can get angry and not sin, just like Jesus did. Also, God made us. God, and then Jesus is God's son, and we were made in the image of God, and God made us to have emotions. So by that story, we can see that it is okay to be angry. I want you guys to hear that it is okay to be angry, but I want to take a look at kind of a bigger picture of that, kind of how we can be angry in this season, in this time. But before we jump into that part, I want to actually take a look at the benefits of anger. Yes, why anger is good. So a lot of this stuff, I will tell you guys, is from this book. It's called Why Emotions Matter. We'll link it down below so you guys can grab a copy of that if you would like. But I want to take a look at the benefits of anger. So the first benefit of anger is that it signals to us that our expectations haven't been met. So a lot of times this is pointing to the fact that we have selfish expectations, but it is pointing to one of our expectations. But imagine if we lived in a world where no one got angry. If no one got angry at the fact that their boyfriend cheated on them, or no one got angry that there are girls being sold into sex trafficking, what kind of world would that be? That would be a world where it would be proof that we didn't care about these people. Our anger shows us that we care about these things, that we have an expectation that things should be just and fair. The second thing that is a benefit of anger is it gives us the energy we need to take responsibility for frustrating situations. So think of homework. We get mad that we have homework. We don't like having homework. We get frustrated with homework. But that frustration and that anger gives us the motivation to actually do it. It gives us the motivation to finish it so that we don't have to do it anymore. And the third benefit of anger is it helps us assess our true values. So anger helps us see what is really important to us. And a lot of time the anger is a sign that something on the outside doesn't match something on the inside. It's an indication that there's something off. So think of group projects, for example. Say you're with some friends and you guys are talking about group projects and you say, "I really like working with other people. I love being collaborative. I love getting all the people in the room and doing that kind of stuff." But then you start a group project and you find yourself getting super frustrated at everyone, like, come on, why aren't you thinking like me? Why aren't you doing what I want you to do? And all that kind of stuff. So that would be an example where you're saying one thing, you're saying you like hanging out and doing group projects and doing the work, but really you don't, and it frustrates you. And so there's that difference in between what's going on the outside and what's going on the inside. And it kind of just gives us an opportunity to kind of self-evaluate that our anger does. So if we just take the emotion of anger, we can see that it has some benefits to us. It helps us see unmet expectations, it helps us accomplish things, and it helps us see our true values. So why is Jesus linking it to murder? If those are three benefits, why is Jesus linking it to murder? Does that make sense? Why is he telling us that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be judged? And it's because of how our anger is manifested toward others. Notice how Jesus says if you're angry at a brother or sister, not just are you angry, but if you're angry at someone. And it's because a lot of times our anger manifests itself in actions that are hurtful toward others. So I want to go over 4 different ways that we tend to kind of express our anger. And the first one is blame. We tend to blame other people. We say other people are the cause of our emotion of anger instead of owning it. Like we talked about earlier, anger can show us unmet expectations in our life. So if there's an unmet expectation of something and you say that it's someone else's fault, that's blaming them. You're blaming them for your feelings. So for an example of this is with text messages. So your friend doesn't respond to a text message for a long time, and you blame them for your frustration that they didn't respond to your text message. But the problem with blaming is we're also assuming motives. A lot of times what happens is like, oh, she didn't respond to me, he didn't respond to me, he must be having fun somewhere else, he doesn't like me anymore, he likes this person better, or something like that, instead of being able to own the fact like, oh, he's just not on my time schedule, and being able to own that personally. So we tend to blame other people for our anger instead of owning that ourselves. By blaming others, we oversimplify complex issues and that have a lot of nuance and make false assumptions about other people instead of looking at what is actually going on. A second way we react to anger is we dehumanize we tend to focus on one negative characteristic about a person, and then anytime that person does something wrong, we just equate it to that negative trait of that person. So for example, if you have a friend that smokes a lot of weed, anytime they do something wrong, it's because they're a pothead or it's because they're a stoner. We tend to take it and make it so they only have one attribute, so that anything that they do wrong can then be attributed to that. And so we kind of flatten them into a one-dimensional object, and it makes it easier for us to be mad at them. It makes it easier for us to blame them for things. It makes it easier for us to kind of look at them and say, they're the reason I'm having a hard time. Instead of recognizing that they're a human, they have a story, they're a complex being, they're made in God's image, we tend to just flatten. And we see a lot of that right now with what's going on politically, racially, all sorts of things in our climate right now. People are just lobbing grenades at each other that project one group of people as one thing and saying that it's their fault that this is happening, instead of pulling back and recognizing there's a much bigger story at hand, and that they're people, and there's stories that are happening, and they're individuals. So that's another thing that we do, is we tend to dehumanize people. The third way that anger comes out is violence, and we have seen that also recently as well. We've seen riots, we've seen shootings, we've seen all sorts of things. So that is one way that anger comes out. And like we've talked about before, anger comes with this powerful surge of energy. And so a lot of times that energy becomes violent because that's the only way we know how to get it out of our body. And lastly, the kind of thing that comes out of anger is we tend to stew on it. We sit on it. We just kind of let it sit there in the back of our head, and that's kind of what happens when we don't address our anger, when we don't deal with it, when we try and ignore it. So that can really come out in ways like this: the sarcastic comment to your friend that you're like secretly mad at, just to make them look stupid, or it can be you not responding to someone's text right away because they didn't respond to your text right away, that's another way that can kind of manifest itself. And this is when we let the bitterness kind of just eat away at us, and we don't deal with it, and then it kind of manifests itself in other areas of our lives. So that was a lot of information about anger. So anger, we learned that anger can be used to help us see unmet expectations, help us accomplish things, and help us see our true values. But the dark side of it is blame, dehumanizing others, violence, and stewing. So what do we do with that? Because Jesus tells us that this is a serious issue that can keep us from being in right relationship with him. And as an apprentice of Jesus, I want to be in right relationship with Jesus. As Jesus' apprentice, we can see that Jesus got angry. So how are we supposed to deal with our anger? How are we supposed to follow the way of Jesus as we feel these very human and not wrong emotions? So I have 4 little points for us, and then we'll move on. But the first step to being able to kind of recognize our anger is recognize that you're angry. Take a second and just recognize that you are angry. One thing that's helpful is putting a number to it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you? 1 being like, and then 10 being like, I am about to blow my lid. So kind of putting yourself on that spectrum, because in our culture, there's so many different ways of saying angry. There's ticked off, there's pissed, there's frustrated, there's annoyed. There's all these ways that we've labeled angry. But if we can put ourselves on a spectrum and just recognize the fact that I am angry, it helps you actually deal with the problem. And second is allow yourself time to cool down. Anger is kind of a little bit like a blundering puppy, always has way more energy and excitement than you actually need for the situation. So take some steps to cool down. Take a deep breath, go for a walk, close your eyes, listen to a calming song, and whatever you need to do to get your head back on straight. And if you're higher up on that scale, go for a run. Do something that helps you calm down, because if you're that high up on the scale, you're not in a good place to be making decisions right now. So you need to be able to get your emotion under control. And physical movement is a great way to work out your anger. And if you are in the middle of a conversation with someone, it's okay to tell them that you're angry. You don't need to go into detail. You don't need to yell at them. You don't need to scream at them. Just say, hey, I'm angry. I'm getting frustrated. Can we please take a little bit of a break so that I can cool down, and I'll come back to you tomorrow, or I'll come back to you in a couple hours. That is perfectly okay to do. The third step, after you've recognized you're angry and given yourself some time to calm down, is to reflect on your anger. So by this point, you should be calm enough to be able to think about the situation and kind of ask yourself some questions. You can ask yourself what it would be like to be in the other person's shoes. It's not a comfortable question, but it's one that needs to be asked. You can also ask yourself how you might have contributed to the situation. How have you made decisions that are causing this situation to either blow up or causing it to be something that's super frustrating for you? And third, look at your own expectations. We talked about earlier that anger helps show us what our expectations are. So take a look and see which of your expectations wasn't met, and is it a selfish expectation or is it a reasonable one? That'll be, just reflect on your anger so that you can take a clear look at the situation. And the last step is problem solving, and it usually involves confrontation, which isn't super comfortable. I personally hate confrontation, so this step is really, really hard for me, and we tend to shy away from it. But this is where you let the other person into the conversation. An example of this could be with a friend who is consistently canceling plans they made with you to go hang out with a boyfriend or girlfriend. So that's frustrating. Yes, you feel hurt by that. So after you've cooled down and have your head on your shoulders, approaching them and letting them know what you see, what you feel, and then kind of what you expect. So it would look like saying look, it seems like you're canceling on me quite a bit, and I know you're going and hanging out with your boyfriend. that makes me feel like I'm not important to you. That makes me feel hurt. That makes me feel sad, or whatever fill in the blank it makes you feel, and say, I would really appreciate it if we make plans, if you stick to them. That to me is what a true friend is. And yes, it's awkward, and yes, it can be uncomfortable, but it really just opens that door to have a heart-to-heart conversation about the issue with that friend. So in the example I gave of going to a friend's house and them canceling on you or whatever, it helps both parties kind of see like, oh, I've hurt this person, or oh, maybe I'm clingy. I have too many expectations on my friend. So being able to have those open and honest conversations might be awkward at first, but it really leads to a place of intimacy with your friends and with God. And then the last step in anger is forgiveness. And Parker is going to talk about that next week. But for this week, I want to challenge you guys in an area, and I want you guys to ask yourself, how do you need to change how you handle anger? Do you need to stop blaming others for your feelings? Do you need to stop giving dehumanizing labels to people or groups of people that you don't like? And so that you can continue to hate them without feeling bad because it's just a label, it's just that people over there. How are you going to take Jesus's words about anger seriously? How are you going to give this area of your life to Jesus? So we have some discussion questions below to help you process through this. So reach out to your small group leader, reach out to a friend, talk to your parents about this, show your parents this video. But I would love for you guys to answer some of these questions with each other and with your friends and your family. If you don't have anyone to process through this with, send me or Parker a text. We would gladly meet up with you and hang out and process through some of this with you. But I miss you guys so much. We have some exciting stuff coming up that we will announce at the beginning of September. So please, please, please stay tuned, and we miss you and hope your first couple weeks of school are going really well. Love you guys.